Welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Tim Weigel, team leader of the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program and Grape and Hops IPM specialist with the New York State IPM program. And I am joined here today with my colleague Andy Musa, who is the Erie County, Pennsylvania component of the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program. And so we're going to talk, in an earlier podcast, we talked about maybe some of the things growers should look at as far as IPM during the dormant season. And today we're going to talk about bud swell through 6 inch of shoot growth. So, all right, let's say we're getting ready. The buds are starting to swell. What should I be concerned about if I'm a grower?
Really, at this point, you don't have to worry about any diseases. The only thing we have to worry about are insects. So this is fairly easy at this time of the season. You only have to worry about the grape flea beetle, or sometimes it's called the steely beetle, during the bud swell. And once in a while, too, the other insect that might cause some problems as far as feeding on swollen buds will be climbing cutworm. I really haven't seen that many problems with climbing cutworm over the years. But it still can be a factor if you have maybe weedy areas or a situation like that. But you're more likely to find during this time period a steely beetle or grape flea beetle. And you should be out there scouting at this time, and really basically next to the wooded edges is where you're going to find them on border rows. During sunny days is usually when they'll be out feeding. And I think probably, about 2% bud injury, I think. I know for climbing cutworm.
It used to be 2%, but I think as we've, since that provisional threshold was put in place, we're started to increase the number of buds that we leave.
Okay.
And so
that's a good point.
It's one of those where you have to look at, well, now how many buds can I afford to lose? And so are you worried about spring frost? Are you worried about what are some of the things that are going to cause you to lose buds? But that 2% at least gives you something that you can look at as an action threshold.
And again, depending on the season, if sometimes we're at the bud swell stage, if it's cool weather during that time, it can be extended. So that would be a time that you'd really have to continue that scouting and be more worried about injury if you have that problem, because they'll be in that stage for a longer period of time.
Right. And I think the real concern with the steely beetle or the flea beetle is that it bores directly into the bud and it hollows out the bud. So it'll take care of anywhere from the primary to tertiary bud, so you don't even have any vegetative growth. It'd be all adventitious buds. I think the worst case of that I saw was they actually thought it was freeze damage that had wiped it out. But when you went in and looked, it had actually bored out the buds of the first 3 rows next to the wood. So it can be a really severe problem if you let it go. But it's one of those ones where it isn't worth investing a lot of scouting every year. Know where your problem areas are, where you've had it in the past, and concentrate on that, especially as you mentioned, in those years where we have a prolonged period of bud swell. If it goes through like that, then even if grape flea beetle's around, it's not going to be a problem.
It goes too fast. If we're so now we broke bud and would be at the 1 inch stage. So,
yeah.
If you look at in the guide, we go through the different phenological periods. Really at the 1 inch stage, about the only thing you'd have to worry about is if you're, say, a vinifera grower, or a grower that's growing high-value interspecific hybrids. Right. Then at that stage, you should be thinking about a powdery mildew spray. And again, that would be only if in a situation or in a block where you had high inoculum levels the previous season, you have very susceptible varieties like vinifera or certain interspecific hybrids, and it's again. Weather that 1/10 of an inch of rain and temperature-wise 50 degrees. So that would get the primary inoculum going that early in the season. But otherwise, even if you have vinifera blocks that you've had good control, The 1-inch stage might be a little early, but depending on your inoculum levels and your varieties and the weather, you might have to put on a spray even at the 1-inch stage for
Right.
powdery mildew.
Yeah. And one of the questions I've gotten in the past is, well, how about if we have cold temperatures? Will that kill the overwintering inoculum of powdery mildew? And I mean, it basically overwinters in a stone called, you see the Cleistothecia, the little black dots that are on the leaves. And it's going to take weather cold enough to kill the vine before the powdery mildew is affected whatsoever. So it is one of those things. Look at what your problems were last year, and that will help you get a handle on what it is you might have to worry about in the coming year. I just wanted to touch on the climbing cutworm for a minute.
Okay.
Because you're going to see the damage from it, and it will feed up to 3 inches of shoot growth, and it basically just clips off the shoot, and it likes to move up and down. It feeds at night, and then during the day, you mentioned the weedy areas under the vines, because it'll go down into the weeds under the row during the day. And it likes the lighter soils, kind of like with rose chafer. So you're going to have specific areas where it could be a problem. Again, it's a secondary pest. It's not one of those pests that you need to scout everything. But have a handle on what's happening in your vineyards, and just to keep it from getting larger.
And chances are with that insect, if you do have it, like you said, you'd only have to spot spray. I've never seen it in really extensive areas. I've seen it in pockets and rarely. So again, if you're out there scouting, it's one of those that you'd have to worry about if you have it, because it can do a lot of damage. But I haven't seen much of it, and that's why scouting is important, and then probably only spot spray.
Yeah, and unless you scout at night with a lantern, you're not going to find the pest. You're just going to see that the shoots have been chewed off, and so.
Another is we're on the 1-inch stage. I guess we're talking about from the bud break to 6-inch. So we would be going into now, say at the 3-inch stage, I would concentrate now on phomopsis.
Right.
Phomopsis cane and leaf spot. At that period, even for Concord growers, the recommendation is to put a spray on for phomopsis. I was going to say if the weather is conducive, but at least up here in the Lake Erie region, and probably everywhere in the spring, we're always going to get wet weather that may be conducive for this disease. So I would say any growers, no matter wine grape growers or juice grape growers, at that 3-inch stage, you should be putting on a spray, or at least thinking about putting on that spray for phomopsis.
Your sprayer should be ready and calibrated in case you need to. Yeah.
And I want to back it up a little bit. And in 2017, this was the only time I saw it. Like I said, we usually recommend that 3-inch stage to get it on, but we had a period of weather there that the shoots were about 1 inch, and they stayed there for about a week. And we actually had, for a week period, we actually didn't have any growing degree days over that week, and we had a lot of rainfall, and the vineyards were wet for maybe a 2-day period.
Right.
And that's the only time that at that 1-inch stage where there was infection from phomopsis. And of course we found that out after, and none of our growers had actually put on a spray that early. They usually wait to the 3-inch stage. And in 2017 we had some severe shoot infections from phomopsis.
Yeah.
So that's about the only year that I've seen that where if a grower would have had to get that 1-inch spray on.
Yeah, and that's an anomaly.
Yeah.
But I think talking with Kevin Martin, who's the business management specialist with our team, the cost of materials that you're going to apply, like Mancozeb and EBDC, is so inexpensive when you compare it to the amount of crop that you can save. What you're really looking for, we don't have anything for phomopsis, any materials for phomopsis where you can say, oh, I had an infection period, I'd better put something on and get the kickback. It all needs to be protective. So you'll want to watch the weather, have your newest station, and watch the weather forecasts. it will predict, NUA predicts what the chance of infection is for 5 days out using the National Weather Service forecast. So that's a really nice tool. But get that material on ahead of time. It's really, if you can see it once that cluster starts to come out, and you're trying to protect the rachis of the shoulder of that cluster, because that's what they've found, the little micro infections have caused those to slough off and lost a lot of crop that way. So is there anything else they should
At the time period, I would say probably again at that 3 to 6 inch stage, 3 to 5 inch stage. If you're a vinifera grower, or again someone that has interspecific hybrids that are very susceptible, that would be a period where I would start my sprays for powdery mildew.
Right.
It's really important to, at that 3 to 6 inch stage, to make sure you start the powdery mildew sprays because they're highly susceptible varieties, especially again like we talked about at the 1 inch stage if your inoculum levels were high.
Right.
And so that's what I would worry about at the 3 to 6 inch stage. Black rot rarely, unless it was a really severe situation in a block,
And you had a lot
it would
of
be a little
problems
bit too early.
last year.
Yeah, a lot of problems last year. It would be too early. There's 2 other diseases that we really don't see here too much, but it is in the guide. They mention it would be the anthracnose and the angular leaf scorch. However, if you're spraying for phomopsis at this time and you're using some of those materials like the mancozeb or the captan, they may not be registered for those diseases, and we're not recommending them for those diseases.
Right.
But if you're spraying for phomopsis, you also can control those diseases.
Right.
And I've seen angular leaf scorch here and there in very wet seasons, but I've never seen it to the point where even on the foliage that there's that much foliage where you'd really have to worry about it. It's more of an interest for someone that likes pathology, grape pathology. But now some areas it may be, but at least in the Lake Erie region it's not. But if you are putting on a spray for phomopsis using like a mancozeb or a captan, then you will get the benefit of that spray for some of the other diseases.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, if you haven't started using NUA by this point in the season, you should find the station or stations that are closest to you and start using that on a regular basis. If not daily, at least every couple days or before the next forecasted weather. So that's it for this week. If you have any questions or you have comments, you have suggestions for next week's podcast, please leave it in the comments section below.